Welcome to Healing Hearts. I am Rakaya, and I have a really special guest today. I have Mr. Brian Smith, who is a grief guide, a life coach, and also the author of Grief to Growth. It is a really, really helpful book. It's available on Audible, which is good for us with, going through grief. I say it all the time. I read a lot before losing Damani, but after, it's been so hard for me to retain what I read, and he addressed that in the book and the reason that he put it on Audible. So it's really good and refreshing to connect with someone who actually understands what we're going through. And we've had a lot of female guests on, and today we have a male guest who's going to help us understand a little bit from the male perspective and just what his journey through grief has been, but also what his journey through growth has been and how he's found growth and new purpose through this experience of loss. Welcome, Brian. Welcome to the show.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And you see, I stumble over some words, loss, and, I hate to say death. I don't really like to say loss. I know that they're physically gone, but it's really no words for what this experience is. I don't know what you usually would term it. Like, do you say loss or?
Well, it is a loss. I mean, we can't get around the fact that it is a loss. We miss their physical presence. But what I don't say is that you lost your child, because your child is not lost. So there's a distinction there. We have a loss of their physical presence, but they're not lost. I mean, they know exactly where they are, and they're well, and they're healthy, and they're whole, and they're still with us. So I do say that, there is a loss. In terms of the word death, I very rarely use the word death. It depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to an audience that won't understand what I'm talking about, then I'll just say death. But usually I don't say it because we don't die. Our bodies do stop functioning. Our bodies do die, but we are not our bodies. So I don't say that Shayna died. I say that Shayna transitioned, Shayna graduated, Shayna, moved on, things of that nature. But I never say that Shayna died.
Something that I'm just starting to research and look into, and I heard you mention it in your book and on your podcast. By the way, he does have a podcast. It's also called Grief to Growth. So make sure you subscribe to his podcast as well. Subscribe to this podcast and share this video so that people who can benefit can actually hear the message of today. But you talk about soul plans a little bit, and that's been something that I've been wondering, because it's when we're born or when we're in the womb, is this something that was already determined that this would be the length of time that our kids were here?
Soul planning is a really interesting concept. I never really frankly heard about much until after Shayna transitioned. And I always tell people it's ironic that it took the worst event of my life to convince me that there is a plan and that everything is going to work out okay. But when I talk to people, I don't really like to force people to believe too much. So here's what we know. We know that our children have transitioned. And we know that we can't bring them back while we're physically here. So we have a choice as to how we look at it. I choose to look at it as it was a plan that this is for everybody's benefit, and that helps me to get through it. Now, other people might choose to look at it and say, this terrible, tragic thing just happened to me, and bad things just happened, and that's your choice. I just don't see that as being a beneficial choice. So by believing that it's a choice, it gives me purpose in my life. It makes me feel like Shayna, even though she was only here for 15 years, she fulfilled what her mission is. And it gives me strength to kind of keep going on, because my mission is to be here longer. So that works for me. And if it works for other people, then, you should take it. If not, then it's okay. I know people that say that it makes them feel unempowered, which is interesting, because the soul plan, I believe, is not made by some higher power or somebody else. It's us. We make the soul plan. So we sit down with people in our group and we make this plan and we make these agreements. So it's not, to me, it doesn't take away any power. To me, it actually empowers me, because I know that my higher self planned this.
Wow. And so you just mentioned Shayna and that she was here for 15 years. Tell us a little bit about Shayna.
Shayna, let's just start at the beginning, I guess. When Shayna was born, the night she was born, the nurses said, you're going to have your hands full with that one, because Shayna was just the way that she cried in the nursery that night. And when Shayna was 2 years old, I remember looking at her playing in the other room here, And I said, I hope she uses her powers for good, not for evil, because she was just always a very determined child. Whatever she set her mind to, she would accomplish it. We homeschooled both of our girls for the first 8 years of school. Shayna, so she went to school in 8th grade. She went right to the top of her class. She was like 16 out of 600 in her class in high school. She played basketball at a national level. She played volleyball at a national level. She played basketball for most of her life. And then her last year, she decided, I want to play volleyball. And she had never played before. And she went out for the team. She made it. She went to nationals. That's just kind of the kid that she was. She was very popular in school, even though she was only there for 2 years. There were about 500 people at her service when she transitioned. So she had a huge impact while she was here. She always seemed to know she wasn't going to be here long. She had this huge zest for life. She wanted to try everything. I remember one time she said, I want to break my leg. And we said, Shayna, why would you want to break your leg? Well, I want to know what it's like to walk on crutches. When she was diagnosed with arthritis, she had a very severe case of rheumatoid arthritis. But when she was diagnosed, I remember walking down to the lab with her. They were going to draw blood. She said, this is the first time I've had blood drawn. I wonder what that's going to be like. So everything in her life was just kind of an adventure. She just lived everything out to the fullest. But she also gave us little indications that she wasn't going to be here long. When she was about 10, we have a daughter that's 3 years older, and my other daughter was going through puberty. Shayna said, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to get boobs. I don't want to have a period. I don't want any of that stuff. We said, well, Shayna, that's kind of the deal we make when we come here, that, we have to grow up. But she's like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And then literally just a few weeks before she passed, we were up in Columbus, which is a couple hours from here at my parents' house, and she was playing with her cousins. And she said to my other daughter and her cousin, she said, when I die, I want to be buried under a tree. I want to be cremated and buried under a tree. We're like, so I didn't learn this until after Shayna had transitioned, and we were trying to make a decision about cremation. And my wife and I decided to have her body cremated. And we were going to my other daughter to make sure she was okay with it. And Kayla said, yeah, because that's what Shayna would have wanted. And we said, well, how do you know that? And then she tells us a story. This happened about 6 weeks before she transitioned that she made that comment. So that's Shayna while she was here. Just a force, just a light. Her name actually means beautiful light. Shayna Lane is her full name. So since she's transitioned, she's been just as forceful. She has put all kinds of synchronicities in our life. She gives us signs all the time. She drops in. We have a lot of friends that are mediums and people that aren't professional mediums. And Shayna will drop in and deliver messages. She manipulates things in the house, my computer, the lights in our bedroom, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So she is very determined to never let us forget that she's still with us.
Wow. And you gave me chills when she said about getting cremated. It's funny, I just asked in the group that I have on Facebook about people whose children said things like that before they passed, because a lot of people have been telling me. I have a friend who her son was shot, and a few weeks before he told her he didn't want to be buried under the ground. He wanted to be in a mausoleum. Just weird things like that. I have a couple of friends who their children would talk to them about dying like a few weeks before, like saying that the angels, one woman, she told me that her son said that angels were on their block and that he needed a new watch because he didn't know what time. He couldn't tell the time that the angels were coming to get him.
Wow, that just gave me chills. But I work with a lot of parents who have had children transition, and it's pretty common. It's pretty common that they'll give us some indication they're going to go early. There's something about these kids, and everybody thinks their kid is special, of course, but there's something about kids that transition early that seems to be special. They seem to live life full out. They seem to have a really great connection with people while they're here. They tend to be leaders. And almost every single one of my clients, they've told me these stories about their kids and what a huge impact they had in just a short period of time. It's almost like they know, I'm only going to be here for a short period of time, so I'm going to do everything I can while I'm here. And they do things to set up for what the rest of us are supposed to do once they're gone.
So their purpose intertwines with our purpose that we have to continue to fulfill once they're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I believe that we don't travel this world alone. We're in soul groups. So we come here. Soul groups are usually people in your family. They don't have to be. They could be people that you meet in your life later on that just kind of come and go, that fulfill a role. But typically we travel with these people over lifetimes. So this is probably not the first time that Shane and I have been together, and we probably had different relationships in the past. But I'll give you an example. I just sitting here at my desk right now. A few weeks ago, I'm involved in all this racial reconciliation stuff, and I was talking on Facebook. And sometimes people give me a hard time because they're like, "Well, you're a spiritual person; you shouldn't be talking politics, etc." So it's kind of having a down day. And my wife comes up to me and she says, "I just found something on our OneDrive, which is a drive that she shared, virtual drive, that Shayna put her schoolwork on." And I'm like, "Well, what is it?" So she brings me these two papers that she found on the OneDrive. One of the papers was about Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin, and it was Shayna's reaction to that. Now, Shayna transitioned not too long after Trayvon Martin was shot, and Shayna was only 15 when she transitioned. So she was like 12, I think, or 14 when she wrote this. But we happened to find it like on the very day that I had come down to my office and I was told to do this thing on race and race and talk about this. I was given like a message, is this what you should talk about? And then I find this paper that Shayna had written that talked about such a timely thing. And she wrote it like, it had been at least 6 or 7 years ago. So I felt like it was like a time capsule. It's like she writes this, it's hidden away. We don't find it for 6 or 7 years. And then we find it at just the right time.
Wow. I have a similar experience with Damani. He made music. He was, like you said, everything you just described. He was that kid. He loved making music. And so he left little messages in songs that I did not realize at the time. So there's this one song called Chances that he had, and it talks about, basically, it says that there's a reason. He said, there's always a blessing in the curse. There's a reason we're put on this earth, and I know mine, and I'll do it every day until I leave in a hearse.
Oh, wow.
He wrote that when he was 15.
Wow.
He passed away when he was 17. So that was one song that left a message. But he had written a song after Tamir Rice passed away. It was inspired by Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice. And he recorded it. He was just playing around with it. And he let me hear it. And later on, I asked him for it, and he said he deleted it. He no longer had it. But in the song, he says, I'm at an age, he said something about Tamir Rice. He said, I'm at an age that I can lose my life, right? And so after everything happened with George Floyd and all of the riots and everything, I just had this longing. I wanted to find that song, and I knew he had said he deleted it. And I was talking to my younger son about it, and he didn't know where it was. It's not anywhere on his computer. And it's so weird, because I feel weird. And then, I didn't like out loud say, Damani, where's the song? But I was in the car with my son, and inside I said, Damani, please help me find the song. I really want it. And within an hour, I found it. Wow. And I shared it. And it sounds like he's talking about what's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was talking with, I was interviewed by a woman named Miami Knight for her podcast, and she was talking about her son, Ty Key, who was a rapper, and he wrote music, and he left little messages in his music. So if we look for these things, I think our kids find ways to send little messages. Now, I don't think they know at a conscious level that they're going to leave early necessarily, but I think there's just this little thing that starts coming through, maybe like a little reminder as they get closer and closer to their time, that this was part of your plan, that you were only going to be here for this amount of time.
So then what does that do? Like for me, I know that I have, even though I can talk like this, maybe later today or tomorrow, I'll have this moment where this overwhelming feeling of I could have done something different will come over me. And I know a lot of parents that I talk to have those feelings like, oh, well, if I would have done this differently, or if I would have done that differently. Like with Damani, he had sudden cardiac arrest. And so like immediately after, it was this vitamin that I had him, taking for pain in his leg, that I started blaming myself. Like, what if it was the vitamin, or what? The day that he went to practice, because it didn't happen at practice, it happened at home. But the day he went to practice, my keys were locked in his car. And so I had to Uber to work. And so I kept thinking, what if I wasn't supposed to go to work that day? What if I would have stayed home? Then I would have been home when it happened. Yeah. And I could have prevented it. So little things like that will happen. But if it's like you said, this plan, how do we reconcile that within ourselves?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, we tend to view their death as a tragedy. So if you think it's a tragedy, it's a terrible thing, then you're going to think, what could I have done to prevent it? But if we look at it the other way and say, what if it was planned and it was meant for them to go? Because we all transition, every single one of us. If you're born, you're going to die. So it's only a matter of when and how. So you can look at it and say, I should have, or I could have done something different. Or you could just say it happened and everything that happened was meant to happen. And that's what I personally believe. As a parent, whenever your child transitions, no matter how they transition, whether it's suicide, whether it's murder, whether it's a drunk driver, whatever it is, we're always going to find a way to blame ourselves. And for me, Shayna had rheumatoid arthritis, as I was saying earlier. And I had to give her, first of all, she was on a very powerful this medicine called methotrexate, which has terrible side effects. We were fortunate she didn't really suffer any. She was on a medication called Enbrel, so I had to give her injections. So I had to give her injections every other week, and I had given her injection on Monday. So when I find her in her bed, I'm responsive on Wednesday. I'm like, what if I did something wrong? What if I give her the injection wrong? And then I started thinking, well, what about, we took her to a cardiologist and she had a couple of procedures, but should we have taken her to a second cardiologist? And she had a follow-up visit scheduled in August, and this was June. Should we have taken her earlier? Should I have asked more questions? Should we have had more scans? All those types of things. Those are not productive thoughts, because the one thing we know we can't do is we can't go back and change the past. So that really literally compounds your grief, because you've got grief already you're dealing with, and now you're dealing with guilt. So what you have to tell yourself is, as a parent and as a human being, we always do the best we can with what we know, where we are. And you would tell a friend that, this is what I tell to my clients, you would tell a friend that, so tell yourself. And I'll give you an example so people know that they're not alone. I was talking with a client one day, and she said, the way my daughter transitioned, I did 6 things wrong. I said, 6? She goes, 6 things. And she listed them off. I did these 6 things wrong. And I said, your daughter was 37 years old. She was a grown woman. She wasn't living with you. She was living in a different place. She had gone to work. She was driving home, and she was hit by a drunk driver. I said, so are you omniscient? Did you know this was going to happen? Well, no. I said, are you omnipotent? Could you have prevented it? She said, no. I said, can you be everywhere at one time? You were here. She was there. And she said, no. I said, then why would you blame yourself? If I told you that story and I told you I was blaming myself, you'd say, Brian, that's insane. But as parents, we do go through that. So it's normal, but we have to let it go. And I'm very fortunate. I guess I pretty quickly let it go. The coroner called a couple of weeks after, or 6 weeks, I guess, after, because there was an autopsy done. And she said, well, Shayna had a congenital thing that could have contributed to this. So we go back to the cardiologist and we're like, okay, she had this congenital thing. He said, first of all, that I don't think is what caused her to have this event. He said, secondly, if I had known she had that, I wouldn't have done anything about it, because the procedure to correct it would have been more risky than the thing itself. So what I've had to come to peace with is this was her time, and we did everything that we knew humanly possible to do. We took her to the doctors. We got the best advice we could get. And at that point, I have to let it go.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's a very, we're not omniscient. We're not in control of it. And if it's their time, it's their time. And it was a peaceful way as well. She passed in her sleep.
Yeah. She passed in her sleep, and she had said she wanted to go in her sleep. Now, again, why a 15-year-old was saying things like this, I don't know, but that was Shayna. And she had said that, when she went, she wanted to go in her sleep. So, and ironically, we had just finished redecorating her bed when we just bought her all new furniture, and she'd just gotten it just the way she wanted it. But she did. She came back from her volleyball tournament on Saturday. She spent the night at her friend's house on Monday. And actually, Wednesday, she was supposed to have her first date, and she passed in her sleep on Tuesday night. But like I said, I think the way I look at it, and the way that helps me to look at it, is that it was her time, her time to go. And when our kids die young, we have this thing as parents, like, well, they're missing so much stuff. They didn't get to graduate, they didn't get to drive, they didn't get to, they didn't get to get married, all those things. they're not missing anything. They're in a better place than we are. They're still living life. They're still having challenges. They're still connected with us. They're with their grandparents and stuff. They're having a good time. They're just hanging out, waiting for us to join them.
How how did you get to that like sense of peace with everything? Has it always been that you had that realization? Did you have low points in the beginning?
I have low points now. Yeah, I don't want to give the impression like this is all really easy and I don't have low points. I still miss Shayna every day. I mean, but I still have a relationship with her. I talk to her every morning when I get up. I talk to her every night before I go to bed. I say good morning to her. I say good night to her. She's inspires me in all the work that I do. She's always over my shoulder, so I can never, forget her. So I have all that, but you still can't bypass the grieving process. So I'm 5 years in. It was 5 years a couple of weeks ago, June 24th. It was 5 years. So I'm 5 years into it. So I went through a time we talked about before we came on the air where I didn't want to be here. I mean, like I didn't want to be here every day, all day long. Now it's only sometimes that I don't want to be here. And it's not so much as a parent that you don't want to be here. You want to be where your kid is. So you're literally torn between two worlds. I've got my wife and my other daughter here. I've got to be here for them, but I want to be with Shayna. I want to make sure that Shayna's okay. So you can't be in both places. So it's something that really literally rips you apart as a parent, I think, especially. And we've got to learn to live with that tension and learn to kind of basically span both worlds as we go through the rest of our life. And we can do that. We can make our kids a part of our life, like I do with Shayna every day. But I also, and some people might find this morbid, but it's the way I get by. Every day I'm one day closer to her. And if you look at death as an end, that is morbid. I don't look at it as an end. I look at it as a transition. It's like a butterfly or a caterpillar coming out of the cocoon. So when we, quote, die, we step out of these bodies back into the magnificent beings that we truly are. So I look forward to that day when I get to go join Shayna and my other loved ones that have gone before me. And one day we'll all be together again.
Right. Looking at it as a day closer. And it doesn't sound morbid to me because I can completely relate to what you're saying. And I think you mentioned in the book that that's the way that you look at milestones. I know a lot of parents dread the milestones. Mm-hmm. And by looking at it in that perspective, it kind of helps you get through those milestones?
Yeah, when you look at life, after it happens, right? So then you get to the first week and the first month and the first year, and you're saying, okay, it's been a week since I've seen her. It's been a month since I've seen her. It's been a year since I've seen her. That's a very draining way to look at things. And you freeze them in time. I freeze Shayna June 24, 2015. That's when her life ended, and I'm moving away from it. I've just chose to completely flip that around. First of all, she's with me. So I don't say I'm moving on, I'm moving forward. I'm moving forward with her. So physically, I can't see her anymore right now, but she's still with me. And then one day I will see her again. I will physically see her again. So I look forward to that. So when I get to the milestones, first of all, I'm proud I made it. I mean, if you had told me a week after she passed that I would be here in 5 years, I would have punched you in the face. Because I was like, I don't want to be here in 5 years. And people would talk to me about 10 years or 15 years. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be here that long. I can tell you 5 years out now, I don't dread every single day anymore. And I don't feel like it's torture being here because I feel like I have a purpose. So I kind of look forward to the next, however long it's going to be. I don't want it to be too long. But I look forward to seeing what I can accomplish, while I'm still here.
So has your purpose kind of evolved for you? Like, have you found purpose through the pain that you've experienced?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it hadn't been for Shayna's transition. I mean, there's no way. I've always been a teacher. I've always liked to write. I've had an internet site or a blog for, I don't even know how long, probably 20 years or more. I've been very active on social media and stuff like that. So the day after Shayna passed, I was like, I'm going to start a blog to just kind of to journal my experiences. So for probably 3 or 4 years, I pretty much wrote every day. And some people found it really helpful. I was very raw. It wasn't any kind of format. It's just whatever happened that day or whatever insight I had or sign she gave me or whatever. And then within a year of when she transitioned, I found this organization called Helping Parents Heal. And I'm the kind of person, I just can't be in an organization. I've got to, like be a leader. So my wife and I started a chapter in Cincinnati. Then we took over the online chapter online on Facebook. I'm still doing a lot with Helping Parents Heal. I'm on the board. And then about a year ago, I was taking this coaching thing, this business coaching thing. And a person I work with said, Brian, there's a life coaching course I think you might be interested in taking. And I thought, I've never said anything about being a life coach. Why would you even send this to me? And I looked at it and I was like, well, it wasn't that expensive. And I was like, yeah, it's something I was already working with people and helping people. So I'm like, this will help me build my skills. So I took the course and then I said, well, let's put up a website and let's, start being a grief guide, because that's what I know for having gone through it as much as I have. And all the studies I've done on the afterlife and things like that, and started the podcast and wrote the book, and kind of the rest is history.
It's almost like some of the things you were doing before were setting you up for doing this, because I even recall you saying something about you were already researching the afterlife even before Shayna transitioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I had an intense fear of death. I was raised as a fundamentalist Christian, and I had a really bad relationship with this guy that I was told was so judgmental, and I couldn't understand why he wanted to send so many people to hell. It just never sat right with me. So it made me fearful of God and fearful of death. And so when I was about 30 or 35 years old, I started really doing a lot of research and like, where did the Bible come from? What did the early church fathers say? What's the real history? All that stuff. So I started really digging through all that. And then I thought, well, if I was born, say, in India, I'd be a Hindu. Or if I were born in Iraq, I'd probably be a Muslim. So I'm a Christian because I was born as a Christian. It doesn't seem fair to me that God would judge me for not understanding those things. So I started studying other faiths as well. And when I did, I found out they all basically say the same thing. And yeah, there's truth. There's universal truth that God or source or whatever reveals to everybody everywhere. It's not just through one book. And then being an engineer by background and being a really analytical person, I was like, well, there's some science to this too. So I started reading everything I get my hands on about the afterlife and near-death experiences and mediumship and instrumental transcommunication and EVPs and all that stuff. And I found out there's a whole lot of evidence that you don't have to just believe. So when Shayna transitioned, the one thing, you can't bypass grief, but the one thing I could bypass was I never wondered, where is she? Most people, when someone passes, are like, oh, they're just gone. Where did they go? I never looked at her body as being her. I was like, Shayna stepped out of her body. So when I say things like, earlier I alluded to the fact that we had cremated her body, I never say that we cremated Shayna, because you never cremate anybody. You never bury anybody. You're saying something earlier, like someone said they wanted to be in a mausoleum as opposed to being buried in the ground. I don't care what you do with this body when I'm done with it. It's like taking off an old coat. It's just like, give it away, burn it, throw it away. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's just something that we use while we're here.
Wow. Now, with the near-death experience research that you've done, has that helped you with that understanding? Because I know some people that have the near-death experiences, they explain that how it feels like they're just stepping out of their body, and how happy or joyous. Some people that I've listened to, they say they didn't really want to come back once they left.
Most people don't want to come back. It's really interesting when people, and there's millions of near-death experiences for people that don't know this. It's not a rare thing. It's a fairly common thing. The way it's been explained, and everybody's experience is a little bit different. For most people, they look back at their body and they either have indifference, unattachment, or they have gratitude. It's like, I'm glad that you served me, but there's never an attachment to that body. There's never like, I want to go back in there. And in fact, with the way it's described, when people come back, they're like, it's too small, it's too tight. It's like wearing a bunch of old wet clothes. They're like, I felt so expansive and free when I was out of the body, and I was kind of squeezed back into this thing. So yeah, it's really helped me with my understanding that, and we were talking about it earlier. We're taught that, if we're taught this at all, we're taught that you're a body and you have a soul. And when I was a little kid, Sunday school is like, you got to take care of your soul because, when you die, your soul's going to go, whatever. That's like exactly the opposite. It's like we are a soul that's using a body. And really, the way I look at our body, the movie Avatar, I think was like in this way. I always think about Avatar. They would get in these little pods and they would control this body. They were actually in a pod somewhere and the body was somewhere else. That's kind of how we are. We're actually in another dimension, on a higher level, and our brain is a receiver. So our consciousness is filtered through our brain. It does play a role, but it's just a receiver. And we animate these bodies kind of like puppets, like a remote control thing.
Wow. That's an interesting way to look at it. And I think like a lot of this is about how we look at it. We have a choice to make, with how we perceive everything that's happening and what we choose to accept or believe.
Yeah.
When you said earlier that you had a fear of death, I know that's another thing. So I talked to some parents who will have their children who had, who said things that indicated they may feel that they're going to leave soon. Or I have parents who, like myself, I always thought that I had this weird feeling leading up to it that I was going to die. Like I kept having this feeling that life was short, but it was always related to me. It wasn't related to my child. And this is in the weeks leading up to, and I have other parents who said that too. So is that something that you have found a correlation with?
I think there is. I think for me, I think maybe we kind of have I think it seems like the plan kind of leaks through sometimes, or maybe we just kind of remember a little bit about it. When I was about Shayna's age, when she transitioned, that was about when I started having panic attacks. And I just knew I was going to die. And I for some reason, I thought I wasn't going to live past 25. So when I had my 25th birthday, I was actually surprised. And every birthday since then, I've been a little bit surprised. So when Shayna transitioned, I was like, well, maybe that was it. Maybe I was sensing her leaving early. And I think that was part of it. I think also part of it was setting me up for her transition. And for me, now I've been studying this stuff for well over 20 years, 25 years probably now at this point. So it set me up to really understand, from a kind of a technical point of view, like what happens to us when we pass, and having had Shayna gone through it, now I understand what it feels like to be that person who's had someone go to the other side. So it's kind of created a situation where I can help guide other people through it because I've been through it and I've also done all the research.
Wow. Yeah, that right there. Because for me, I was a coach and a teacher before this happened. And I worked with a lot of at-risk kids and I worked with a lot of people in trauma. And then I had started doing public speaking, keynote speaking, and talking about trauma and about life being short. And actually, 2 weeks before Damani passed, I had basically given my biggest speech, and the message in it was about life being short and how, as coaches and educators, we need to make sure that we're taking time with the kids that we work with because we don't know how long they will be here, not knowing that I'm going to lose my own child in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so now it's kind of like what you just said. I understand, even though I was speaking those words before, I have a different understanding through my experience now that I feel that allows me to even serve in a greater capacity. I don't want this pain. I didn't choose. Maybe you say I did choose the path, but I wouldn't. I don't think I would have chosen it. But
not consciously, not as a human. I mean, the thing is, there's two aspects of us. There's the human side of us, and then there's what I call our higher self. So as a human, of course, you would never choose this. I mean, you would say, and this is why it's a very controversial and it's a very difficult thing to say. I would never say to a parent that's in early grief because you have to go through a whole series of emotions when you're in grief before you get to the point where you're ready to accept things like this. But as your higher self, you might have chosen it. And the thing is, we all the time as human beings choose tough things to help us grow. We choose to go to college, for example. And when you're in college, it sucks. It's hard. We choose to train. We go to the gym. We work out. We lift weights. When you're lifting the weights, it's not fun. but you do it because you know it's going to make you stronger. We take our kids to the doctor. We give them vaccinations. The shot hurts, but we do it to protect them from future disease. So I think as higher spiritual beings, we say, yeah, I'm going to go to that place and I'm going to go through this. I'm going to experience this. And it's going to teach me patience. It's going to teach me compassion. It's going to teach me love. It's going to make me stronger. It's going to teach me all these things. And I know it's going to be hard. It's only 70 years. I mean, what's that?
Right. And then at the end of it, we get to be together again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what does that look like in your mind, like when we're reunited with our kids?
It's, again, there's a whole lot of different reports on what life is like on the other side. And as far as the particulars go, I don't think we really know. And I think it's varied and it's diverse. And I think it's one of the reasons we don't know, because some people report that like you don't have a body anymore. You're just like a ball of light. Most people don't think that's true at this point, but I think they're different levels, and they're not like it's number 1 through 5, but different types of environments we can go to. So some people, it's a very physical existence. They'll continue to do things they do here. They'll play golf, they'll play guitar, they'll go boating, they'll go mountain climbing, they'll do things like that. Some people might go to a level that we might consider higher, that's more etheric, where they may not be as physical as we perceive ourselves to be here. So I think it's somewhere, in there. But what we do know is that it's not boring. It's not like, you sit on a cloud all day and you sing songs, or, it's not like you play the harp or anything like that. And I think it's a lot of what you choose that you want to do. And then I think most of us, as hard as it is to hear, most of us choose to come back here to learn different lessons or have different adventures, whatever those things may be, because once we're over there, we have such a higher perspective. But I think as far as the reunion goes, I've told Shayna, you better be the first person that's there when I go, and I'm sure that she will be.
Gosh.
And I'll get to see her again. And this is reported for many people who've had near-death experiences. The people they've seen, when they cross over to the other side, it's their family, it's their loved ones. People maybe that you didn't even meet while you were here, but people you knew when you were there before you came here. So that's our real home. This is where we come to train and to learn and to grow. And it's a very, very short period of time while we're here. So, but for whatever reason, there's a veil, and there's just this, we can't remember while we're here. And well, not for whatever reason. If we remember it while we were here, we couldn't get our jobs done, because all we'd be thinking about is going home. And I have a friend had a near-death experience, and he goes, living here is just like living in the gutter when you have a mansion, waiting for you. So if we all remember that, we'd be like, I'm just ready to get out of here and go back to my mansion. So we do the best we can while we're here, but it's a temporary thing.
Right. And even, when you look at like all of the scriptures, it talks about, it paints the picture of it being like paradise, beautiful. And so it is only natural for me now in this place that I'm at too long and say, well, why is it so crazy for me to want to be in this place that is better than what Earth is? I mean, why do people think I'm crazy for talking like that?
Well, it's interesting because growing up in the church, people would die and people would cry because people died. I'm like, well, shouldn't we be happy, that they got to go home? And why, if you think heaven is so great, why does nobody want to go? Why do we want to live for a long, long time? Now, I live now because I feel my life serves a purpose, but I do want to go home. And if you have any understanding what the afterlife is like, you're going to long for it. And the people who've had near-death experiences almost universally are like, I can't wait to go back. I have things to do while I'm here. I have a purpose to do while I'm here. But yeah, I'm looking forward to going. And their fear of death, again, is almost universal. It's like there's no fear of death at all. There's sometimes a fear of dying. The dying process can be painful if you have cancer or you get some terrible disease. But as far as death, it's not a big deal. And most people we've reincarnated. We've done this many, many times before. So people, when they die, they're like, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought it was. I just woke up and I was there.
Right. But I think like what you said, that key is that purpose, that each of us has something that we need to fulfill while we're here. Mm-hmm. And sticking to that purpose and finding that purpose. I think that purpose, finding a purpose, and you mentioned serving a lot, that helps me to get through this process, to continue to find strength to get up each day, is focusing on that purpose as opposed to focusing on the absence of the physical presence and the pain that presents for me.
Yeah,
Now,
you said it earlier. Everything's a matter of perspective. So everything's
yeah,
a matter of how we look at it, and literally we can focus as human beings. It's interesting. A lot of people think we can multitask, and we really can't. We can only do one thing at a time. We could switch between things pretty quickly, but we can only do one thing at a time. So we can choose where we place our energy, where we place our thoughts, and we can choose when we get out of bed in the morning. Am I going to look at this as another day without Damani, or another day without Shayna? Or am I going to look at this as an opportunity for me to do something today to fulfill the purpose that I came here to fulfill, and to make my son or daughter proud of me, so that when I see them again, they say, "You did a great job." And they're watching us, and I've been told this by many mediums. They're bragging to each other about their parents. They're saying, "Look at what he's doing right now. Look at what she's doing right now. I'm really proud of them." So while they were here, we were proud of them, but now they're proud of us. So I that's my motivation.
right. And like another way of saying that they still live is that Shayna right now, had she not transitioned, I would not know of Shayna, and she would not be impacting me and
Mm-hmm.
anybody that happens to see this video. She is impacting those lives
Mm-hmm.
continuously, so that's just another way to say it.
Yeah, but before we were actually for our business, we were in Ebony Magazine several years ago. My wife and I, our hair care business, and my wife would tease Shayna like, "You're going to be famous one day, or you are famous or something." And Shayna was like, "Oh no, I'm not going to be famous." So now, Shayna, there's a medium. Her name is Suzanne Giesman, and she's included Shayna in one of her big presentations. And so she travels around the world with Suzanne, and Suzanne's always presenting her. And Shayna's been in front of, I'm sure, thousands of people at this point. The story of Shayna and Suzanne, and their pictures, always up on the screen. So she has become, she's helped a lot of people. I mean, I don't even know how many people she's helped by, putting me in Helping Parents Heal, and the people that I've been able to influence. And she gets talked about in every single interview that I do, which she loves. So, yeah, she's still continuing to have a ripple.
Right. And Helping Parents Heal has a lot of members. I think that's probably where I found you at, is through the Helping Parents Heal group. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like up to like 14,000 parents in the group.
It probably is. It's growing really fast. I don't keep up with the numbers, but it's around 14,000 people. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is helpful. It is a helpful process, especially early in grief, when you feel so alone, to be able to connect with other people and you see a post and you're like, and someone is saying exactly what you're feeling or experiencing. So you're like, oh, I'm not so crazy. I'm not so alone.
Yeah.
You mentioned, go ahead.
Well, that's a huge part of what we go through as parents, because, and you and I talked about this before, and I wrote this in my book about what percentage of people actually have a child transition. And it's about, if you're over 50, it's about 1 in 8. It's about 12%, which seems hard to believe. But the thing is, it's an invisible thing that we carry with us. When people see us out, they don't know that we've had a child transition. So we all feel like, I'm the only person that's ever been through this. I'll never be able to get through this. So it's really important to find a peer organization. Going to a counselor is great, but it's really important to find a peer organization where you can talk to people who know what you're feeling, who are going through it with you at the same time. Find people that are, if you're 5 weeks into it, find someone that's 5 months into it, or someone that's a year into it, or 5 years into it, and ask them, how did you get through this? Did you feel this? I was listening to a podcast one day. We're in the car on the way to in the car, and this woman had written a book. Her name is Donna Visaki, and she was saying that after her daughter had transitioned, she was standing on the curb one day, and she looked out and she saw a bus going by, and she just wanted to step in front of the bus. And it immediately caught my attention, because, like, I've done that. I've been driving in the car and saying, if I just turn this car off the road, I could be with Shayna right now. That's a common thought, and as parents, to talk to another parent that's had that thought, and as you and I talked about earlier, it's not that we're suicidal. It's not that we want to end our lives. It's that we want to be with our kids. There's this pull. There's this longing, and I can only imagine for a mother, it's got to be even worse, because you have a physical connection to your child. So that connection is still there. That physical pull is still there, and that connection, not they, because they don't know how to try to pull, but that connection is pulling you into the other world. And we have to say, okay, I've got to find a way to navigate both worlds while I'm here. I've got to find a way to raise my vibration, to use a term that we use. I've got to find a way to raise my vibration, connect to the other side, connect with my child, but to also live here, while I'm doing that. And it's a hard balancing act, but we can do it.
Yeah, we can do it. And it's interesting to hear you, because sometimes we look at men and it's almost like the fathers are the forgotten grievers. People always focus on the moms, but to hear you say that you've had some of the same thoughts that I have had as a mother, like, can you speak to that for mothers out there who don't understand what their husbands are going through or what the fathers of their children are going through?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to generalize here because we have to, because we're talking, but so there are always exceptions, of course, but Helping Parents Heal is a great example. It's 85, 90% mothers. It's Helping Parents Heal is for both spouses, but most of the meetings are mothers. Most of the members are mothers. Sometimes you'll see when we're having an online meeting, the father will be sitting next on the couch, but they're usually out of frame. They never say anything. There's a subset called Helping Fathers Heal. It's a very small group. Men are not socialized to express their emotions. So what a lot of times happens with men is they shut down. They don't know how to handle it. They might pour themselves into work. They might start drinking too much. They might start staying out. There's an avoidance a lot of times. For me, I was, growing up, I was emotionally distant from my parents. And I always said with my girls, I was never going to let that happen. So I was just really hands-on as a father. I had two girls and, spent as much time as I possibly could with them. We homeschooled them. So I have a connection with Shayna and Caleb that's probably unusual for a father. So when Shayna transitioned, I was like, I'm not ready to let this go. I've got to find a way to maintain this relationship. But I would say to mothers, if your husband or the father of your child is not grieving the way you do, we all grieve differently. It doesn't mean that they don't love that child. It just maybe means they don't know how to express it. You may say, well, he's not crying enough. I cry all the time. Men are not socialized to cry. And frankly, I do most of my crying in the shower. So most people don't see when I cry. So just understand that people do things, differently. We have to each honor each other's way of grieving. If you're lucky, you can go through it together. I was very fortunate that my wife was not interested in anything like this at all before Shayna transitioned. I was reading all these books and listening to podcasts and stuff. My wife's like, why are you thinking about all that stuff? But since Shayna has transitioned, she's realized that this is very beneficial, and she's poured herself into it, studying, listening to podcasts, joining support groups, all those things that really kind of keep her connected. So, for men, I give you permission to grieve. A lot of times men, they need permission to share their feelings and express their feelings, and you'll feel better. I was talking with the mother the other day. It was one of my clients, and she was like, I'm getting over the crying. No, it wasn't a mother. She had actually lost her mother, but she said, I'm not crying as much as I was, and that's a good thing. I said, crying is a good thing. Crying, the way I look at crying is, it's like this emotion wells up in us, and you can feel it welling up in you, and it needs to be released. If you never cry, you're carrying that around all the time, and it's like it's going to eat you up from the inside. When you cry, you release that, and literally there are chemicals in our tears that help us to feel better. And after you cry, you feel better. So for people that say, I don't want to cry, it's like, yeah, let it go, and you'll feel better if you do it.
Right. Now, that is true, because there have been times that, like, I'll feel like numb for a period, and then I'll cry, and then I actually feel better after crying in the days that I may have felt numb.
Yeah.
You talk about routine a lot. So what is your routine? Like, you exercise, you meditate. What things have helped you the most with your process?
Well, for me, when Shayna transitioned, I was walking for exercise anyway, but I was doing probably 3 to 5 miles a day. I do 7 miles a day now. So I get up first thing in the morning, before I get dressed and come down to work, I'll go for a 7-mile walk. And during that time, I'll listen to music, or I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll do a silent meditation for a while. That takes me about an hour and a half, an hour, 40 minutes. I meditate at least once a day. usually 20 to 25 minutes. That's my time to kind of, as I was saying earlier, kind of raise my vibration. I do different types of meditation. I know a lot of people say I don't like meditation, I can't do it. Just keep looking for different things. Find something that works for you. It doesn't have to be sitting silently on the floor with your legs crossed. So just find something that works for you. I study all the time. Every day I'm doing something. I don't read fiction. I read stuff about the afterlife for the most part, because you have to constantly train your mind in this way of thinking. So it could be something scientific. It could be near death experiences. It could be something like, anything like that, but always working on, raising my awareness and raising my awareness of who I am, because it's really easy to get caught up in this world and think of yourself as your body. So those are the things that work for me. The other thing is, and this is for people farther down the road, service. Helping someone else will always help you. So working with other people and knowing that I made a difference in someone's day, getting an email back to someone says, or someone that listens to my podcast and say, I really got a lot out of that. That builds you up. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but the more that you give, if you can give more than you get, you'll feel better. And that's really always the energy balance I try to give, is just giving more than you get.
Yeah, and I think service, it helped me even early on, but I've always been kind of that kind of person, but it helped me. So like on Damani's first birthday, we went out and we went to a soup kitchen and fed the homeless. And it felt so good to have everybody there thanking us for Damani, while we're, feeding the homeless. And then for his first anniversary, we actually delivered toys to the children's hospital. We collected toys and things like that. So service has always been something. And then also reaching back out to parents. And you mentioned the life coaching thing. I got certified after losing Damani as well, because it was like, okay, how do I use this pain to help other people? I knew some of these things before, but now I feel that it is a part of my purpose, that, God gave me this pain, in a sense, to be able to serve people through it. Don't just let the pain be for nothing. Don't just let his life have been for nothing. It has to continue to serve a purpose.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, you're going to go through the pain either way, right? You're going to have the pain, so you might as well use it. And this is why I tell people when we work together, that's why I call it grief to growth. The thing about human beings is it actually takes pain to make us grow. It's kind of like I heard this analogy. There's a certain type of tree that drops a pine cone, and the pine cone doesn't grow until there's a forest fire. The forest fire has to break it open. So it could be years before it actually reproduces. And Jesus said, unless a seed fall to the ground and die, then it dies alone. But once it dies, it bears much fruit. There's something about the human nature, and I think it's evolutionary. As beings, it's evolutionary efficient to keep doing the same thing, that as long as it works. It takes energy to change. It takes more energy to do something different. So until we're knocked out of our routine, then we're just going to keep doing the same thing. So people say, well, why do I have to go through this pain? This is what it took. This is what it took. And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're an idiot or you're hard-headed. It's just human nature. This is what it takes to break us open. And if you can look at it from the big picture for a minute and say, well, yeah, but why did she, have to die for this to happen? It's like, she didn't really die. She just went home early, and she's just there waiting for you. So this is why it was. This is what you need to do. And, once you finish your job, you can go home and see her.
Wow. That she's just at home waiting for you. Yeah. I think that'll help a lot of people watching this, that to look at it that way, because the pain is consuming. But if we remember that they're not completely gone.
Yeah, we can transform it. We can, and it's just as said, it's a matter of how we look at it. It's not as simple as flipping a switch. It takes that daily effort. I tell people, grief is hard work. It's hard work, and I've been working at it every day, all day for 5 years to get to where I am. Well, for longer than 5 years, guys. I started preparing before Shayna left. But we can get there, and we can flip this, and we can actually look at it as, okay, what can I do with this? I've been given this. What can I do with it? How can I transform this? And it's absolutely 100% possible. And I tell people, you're stronger than you think you are. It's interesting, the people that come to me, they're all like warriors. They're all rock stars. And I tell them that, and they're like, oh, you're just telling me that because you're my life coach. It's like, no, the fact that you picked up the phone and called me, the fact that you sent me the email, it means that you want to make a change. You don't want to wallow in this. There are people that will, and you can. It's a choice that you can make. But the people that actually pick up the phone and call me, these are people that saying, okay, I want to move forward. And that's the first step. And if you take that step, you'll find that you have the strength. And it's not like you have to find, the strength is in you. It's already there. Everything you need is already in you. You just need someone to help you kind of bring it out.
Wow. Yeah. And a life coach, a grief guide, a peer group, but we can all help each other. We're not meant to be, like that quote says, that no man is an island. We're not meant to just be alone. We're meant to have people to help us through these processes. And sometimes people feel so alone, especially because society doesn't know how to honor our grief. They don't know how to just honor where we are. Especially people who may have, feel isolated, feel abandoned because people aren't reaching out the way that they want to. But I guess it's turning that energy to the people who can help us, because everybody's not equipped to help us.
Right. Well, that's another thing that happens in grief, especially with the loss of a child. People don't know how to react. So sometimes they just go away. And I don't think I've talked to a single person that's had a child transition that hasn't lost somebody in their life. And it could be a parent, it could be a brother or sister that just doesn't know how to handle it, and they just go away. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they don't know how to handle it. And you will find, my wife, they call their group their tribe. So it's not our family. We love our family and we're close to our family, but the people that really are close to us are people we found since Shayna transitioned. And those are the people that have really drawn close. So I'm actually reading a book right now, a series of book called The Team. And it really emphasizes the fact we think of ourselves as individual. None of us are individuals. We all have soul groups. We all have people that are here to help us, and we have people on the other side that are helping us. Always. We're never alone. So when you feel like you're alone, know that there's a team of people that's rooting for you that you can't see, but they are back there waiting for you. You planned this mission. You're here carrying it out. They're doing their thing from where they are, but you're never alone.
Wow. That really, you're never alone. And when you talk about the new relationships with people who can actually help you, because in the book you talked about the fact that everybody does not necessarily need grief counseling, but talking to someone who's experienced this type of loss can be as fulfilling or as helpful or as cleansing, as healing as going to grief counseling. And I think that's something that needs to, I guess, be said today as well.
Yeah. The thing about grief, most grief we can get through on our own. It's called simple grief or uncomplicated grief. So, a grandmother passes or something, that's elderly, we can usually navigate that around because it's expected. When there's complicating factors, if there's a suicide or there's, a murder or there's a loss of a child or something like that, sometimes that'll trigger something that requires more, work with someone that's kind of dedicated to helping you with that. But for most of us, we can get through it, but really never on our own, because human beings, we're not designed to be on our own. The worst thing you can possibly do to someone is put them in solitary confinement. They will literally go crazy. And when you're in grief and you feel like nobody understands you, a lot of people will shut it down. They will try to white knuckle through it. They'll try to just make it go away. And I guarantee you that it's going to come back at some point, and it's probably going to come back worse than if you just deal with it, up front. So, find someone you can talk it out with. Find someone that understands. If it's a peer-to-peer group, that's great. But just, you got to find somebody to talk to about it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's because even before this, that was my biggest thing, was talking about it with kids who've been through trauma. Talk about it. Go back to that thing. There's an old concept in rites of passage which all my life I've been involved in rites of passage. Are you familiar with rites of
No, I'm
passage?
not. No.
So with rites of passage, it's kind of like back in like African cultures to where children, they come up and when they reach puberty, like sometimes you'll see them with like cuts on their face because that was a ceremonial thing that they did when they reached certain passages of life. Well, my aunt, and it's really the thing that drew me to soul planning was in her book, she wrote about in rites of passage how when we're born we receive our purpose in the womb, and in her book she talked about, and it's weird because I researched this the year before Damani passed because I wrote her obituary. So she passed the year before Damani passed, but in her book she talked about how she was late being born. It took a long time for her to come out because she was in the womb negotiating for her purpose in life.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a concept with rites of passage. So it says that there's different things that happen to us in different passages of life that we have to go back and deal with in order to move forward. So the term is called Sankofa. So like say, for instance, a child is abused in adolescence or in childhood. So in adulthood, they have issues that are stemming from what happened in childhood. And until they go back and actually address what happened, they can't actually function properly in the passage that they're in. So I always talk about the fact that, this is a trauma that we've experienced with losing our child. And so we have to talk about it, and talking about it with someone who can relate. A grief guide who's actually experienced grief, is for me more helpful than me going to a therapist who has not had this kind of loss, because I'm talking to you about it and you can't relate or offer any, like if I tell my therapist that I thought about stepping out in front of a bus or driving off a cliff, they might say something that's not as helpful as somebody that just says, okay, I honor where you are and you'll get through it.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to keep moving through it. So it just helps me to know that, I can talk about it with people like you and others who have experienced it.
Yeah, well, it's funny you talked about that. Your aunt was late being born. So was Shayna. We went in. She was induced because she was a little bit late, and it was supposed to take a couple hours. Long story short, it took like 14 hours for Shayna to be born, and I could see Shayna negotiating. So that makes a lot of sense. But
Damani too. It took him long. My second son, he came out so easy, but Damani, I think it was about probably 10, 12 hours, and he was a week late. And he wrote about it. I found a paper that he wrote, very brief. It was like a paragraph because he was young when he wrote it, and it was called A Star is Born. And he talked about the fact that he was a week late. And I'm like, wow. why were you even concerned with that at like 12 years old, writing about that?
Yeah, well, I could see Shayna negotiating, and there is. I've heard people talk about souls that are coming in that sometimes they'll actually miscarry before they're born because they're like, I'm not doing this, or they'll maybe have a soul plan. I wrote one story. Someone had a soul plan that they were supposed to leave early, and for 3 times they miscarried because they're like they didn't know if they could do that to their mother. So there is, I believe, pre-existence, and the souls that are coming in, they kind of know the plans that they've got, and I could definitely see Shayna negotiating.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that right there, I just think you have so much guidance and leadership in this grief journey, and being 5 years out, I'm going to continue to follow what your podcast and learn from this. And I'm going to continue to look at some of the things that you have on there about the near-death experiences, because it does help me to hear, and not be so frightened, I think, about what is happening with Damani at this point.
Yeah. I tell every parent I talk to, I'm like, okay, don't worry about your kid. Your kid's fine. I've talked to so many mediums. They're like, nobody dies alone. So it's like, well, was he by himself? No, nobody dies alone. There are people there to meet them. So, and when Shayna came through one of the mediums, she said she met these ladies and they were angels, but she didn't know. She thought she was dreaming. So I guess she was there for a while before she realized, or they told her that she had passed. So it's a peaceful transition. People, like, even if your kid goes through something that's painful, a lot of times they're out of their body before it happens. People have been in car accidents, for example, they're taken out before the accident happens, and they'll watch the accident from above. So no matter how your kid transitioned, they were okay.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you. Wow. So yeah, our kids are okay, and we have to do the work. Grief is hard work. So a few things that Brian has recommended that works for him is, number one, talking to people, and exercising, doing something to get your body moving.
Yeah.
And then the meditation. And it's hard, like you said, even when it's helping, because I was on a roll with meditating, and then every now and then you'll stop because you get bitter a little bit. It's like, I got to do all of this work to keep healing. So,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
work.
but
Yeah.
it is work. But
But
when you meditate, do you use do you use any crystals or anything?
I don't. I sometimes use incense.
Okay.
I have an altar that I have, so there is a crystal on my altar. But I have a lot of. I
Okay.
have Shayna's glasses are on there. I have some stones. I have some statues, things that I find like dimes and stuff. I have a box that I keep those in. So those are all on my meditation altar. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing I want to say about meditation, because you were talking about, people sometimes think they're doing it wrong, and I work with this. I know a guy. His name is Kelvin Chen. He's like a meditation expert. He's been teaching meditation for like over 40 years. And he said when his mother passed, I think he said for a year, he would just cry in his meditations. And he thought his meditations were like not working. And then he realized that was his meditation. So your meditation is just feeling whatever it is you feel. So if you go into meditation and you're crying every day, just cry. And if you decide you're going to meditate for 10 minutes, you're probably not going to cry for 10 minutes. You'll probably cry for a couple minutes and then you'll stop. And then feel the feelings you have after you've cried. And I guarantee you'll feel better. So just when you're doing your meditation, just set a goal to sit, and just whatever happens, happens. If your mind's racing, that's okay. Just observe your mind racing.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. And I wish you the best as you continue this journey of healing, but also helping other people heal through their process too. Thank you for your service to our grief community. And thank you, Shayna, for being a guiding light to us all.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Anybody who's watching, make sure you subscribe to this channel as well as to Grief to Growth. And we'll look forward to talking to you next time.
All right. Have a good one.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.